Chapter 1. Echoes Beneath the Ice. The Sea of Ghosts was rarely still, yet that night it slumbered beneath a silence that unnerved even the most seasoned sailors of Dawnstar. The northern wind had halted. The waves seemed to wait. When the first tremor came, it was mistaken for thunder, until the ice cracked like the spine of some buried titan. By morning the shoreline lay broken. Shards of blue-tinged ice glittered along the coast, and beneath the frozen shallows, strange light pulsed as though the sea itself were breathing. Fishermen whispered that Sovngarde's gate had opened beneath the water. The Jarl ordered the harbour sealed. At the College of Winterhold, word of the phenomenon spread swiftly. Arven Thalor, a young scholar of Atmaran relics, pored over reports with shaking hands. His fascination with ancient Nordic script had always been mocked by his peers, useful only to those who chased ghost stories. Yet the descriptions matched something he'd once seen, sketched in a crumbling tome. Runes of frost older than Ysgramor's return, symbols said to bind the breath of the north wind itself. Against the Archmage's hesitation, Arven petitioned to investigate. The ice moves with purpose, he insisted before the council. If the runes are truly awakening, then we must read them before they read us. His plea was granted, though grudgingly. The college could not afford to ignore a disturbance that close to its walls. He left before dawn, wrapped in wool and warding charms, accompanied by 2 mages and a wary guard from the Pale. The wind clawed at their hoods as they neared the coast. The sea had refrozen in jagged patterns, the water beneath flickering with unnatural luminescence. Arven knelt at the edge, breath frosting in the air, and pressed his palm against the ice. A vibration answered, soft at first, then steady as a heartbeat. The runes appeared beneath the surface, 3 intertwined symbols of chilling blue, lines that seemed to shift like living veins. Arven murmured translations under his breath, though many glyphs defied known tongues. One fragment he recognized, Do Kra Omral, dominion of cold eternal. When he spoke the words aloud, the sea exhaled. A surge of frost erupted outward, throwing him backward. The guards shouted, weapons drawn against nothing. The ice had risen, forming a faint outline of stone doors sealed beneath the water, their surface marked with the same glowing script. For a moment, Arven glimpsed shadows moving behind them, tall gaunt figures frozen in mid-motion, like statues trapped mid-battle. Then the glow faded. The sea calmed. Only the sound of their ragged breathing remained. Arven staggered to his feet, clutching his journal. His hand trembled as he wrote the words that would later send Skyrim into panic. There is something sleeping beneath the sea of ghosts, and it dreams in frost. He looked once more at the ice before turning back toward Winterhold, unaware that the pulse of the runes followed his footsteps inland. Far to the west, in the Pale, snow began to fall where the skies had been clear. Wolves fled the forests. The wind carried whispers not of storm, but of awakening. Chapter 2. The Scholar and the Thane. The road from Winterhold to the Pale was a white scar across the mountains, a path of frost and silence. Arven Thalor pressed onward through the cutting wind, his pack heavy with scrolls, his thoughts heavier still. The runes beneath the Sea of Ghosts haunted his dreams. He saw them each night, blue veins spreading beneath his skin, the ice whispering in an ancient tongue he could almost understand. Dawnstar lay shrouded in storm when he arrived. Snow swirled through its streets like restless spirits, and every roof groaned beneath a burden of unnatural frost. The guards wore layers thick as armor, their beards crusted with ice. When Arven presented the college's seal, they exchanged uneasy glances before ushering him toward the long hall. Inside, a fire struggled against the cold, its light barely warming the banners of the Pale. Upon the high seat sat Thane Rorick, his eyes hollow with sleeplessness. The frost had crept even into the mead on his table, crusting its rim with crystals. So the college finally sends one of its robed thinkers, Rorick said, his voice like gravel beneath snow. Tell me, scholar, can your books melt my dead fields? Arven bowed. Not melt, my lord, but perhaps explain. The frost consuming your hold began with the awakening of an ancient rune beneath the northern sea. Its magic spreads through ley lines, the same that feed the winds of Kyne. If left unchecked, it could swallow Skyrim in ice, Rorik finished bitterly. Aye, I've heard the sailors' tales. The sea itself breathes now, they say, but breath does not kill crops or freeze men standing. Arven produced a parchment, unrolling it upon the table. It showed rough sketches of the submerged carvings. These markings are Atmaran, but mixed with script older still. They speak of a binding, a rune meant to cage something vast, something divine. Rorik studied the symbols, his brow furrowed. I've seen marks like these before, he murmured, in the ruins of Hjaldren Keep. My forebears built their halls atop it, but the lower vaults were sealed generations ago. My steward said the stone there bleeds cold. The scholar's pulse quickened. Then that is where the frost flows from. If the rune's energy is seeping through Hjaldren, the keep may hold the second fragment. We must see it. Rorik rose, his heavy cloak dusting the floor with snow. Then you'll have your chance, mage. But know this, no spell or prophecy excuses cowardice. Whatever waits in that ruin, we face it together. By nightfall they rode beneath a moon pale as bone, their torches bending in the wind. Hjaldren Keep loomed upon a frozen cliff, its towers leaning like teeth gnawed by centuries. The gate stood open, rimed with ice so thick it seemed carved from crystal. Inside, the air was deathly still. Their steps echoed through corridors glazed with frost, every banner stiff, every torch dead. As they descended into the lower halls, a faint hum filled the stone, a vibration that grew stronger with each step. At the heart of the ruin lay a door carved from glacier glass. The same blue symbols burned across it, identical to those beneath the sea. Arven pressed his palm against the rune. The air shimmered, and for an instant he felt the world breathe again. A voice like cracking ice whispered from the darkness. Du Kra Omral. The Dominion stirs. Rorik's blade sang free of its sheath. The frost on the walls began to move, slow at first, then flowing, coiling into the shapes of long dead warriors clad in shards of ice. By Kyne, the Thane muttered, gripping his axe. Your words wake more than just stones, scholar. Arven drew his staff, the rune's light glinting in his eyes. Then may knowledge stand beside steel tonight. The frost wraiths screamed, and Hjaldren Keep came alive with the sound of battle. Chapter the 3. Whispers of Hermaeus Mora. When the battle's echo faded from Hjaldren Keep, silence reclaimed the ruin, a silence too deep to be natural. Frost wraiths had dissolved into mist, yet the walls still pulsed faintly with that otherworldly rhythm. The runes no longer glowed, but their chill lingered in Arven's bones. They found the second fragment sealed within an altar of ice. Rorik's men took hours to break it free, the mage whispering wards to keep the frost from devouring them whole. The fragment resembled a shard of crystal, etched with spiraling script that shifted when seen from the corner of one's eye. Arven recognized the style, not entirely Nordic, nor even mortal. That night, as they camped beyond the ruin, Arven studied the shard by firelight. The script twisted like living ink, reforming into shapes he could almost read. His quill trembled as he copied each curve into parchment. When the wind stilled, he realized the whisper he heard wasn't from Rorik's watchman. Scholar of frozen blood, you seek the words buried by gods. The voice came not from air or mind, but from within the shard itself, deep and patient, layered with 1,000 tones. I know them, I wrote them. The first frost, the last thaw. You wish to understand this, then read where eyes are forbidden. He felt a pull, gentle yet irresistible, a vision coiling like smoke around his thoughts. The campfire dimmed, the night folded inward. When he blinked, he stood not in the pale, but upon a sea of ink beneath an endless sky of floating tomes. Pages turned themselves, whispering secrets that melted as soon as they were heard. Apocrypha. Towers of parchment and tentacles rose from the black waters, and at their heart, a vast orb of eyes, each blinking in unison. Welcome, little seeker, murmured Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of knowledge. You touch the Frost Rune, yet you know not who first bound it. Arven's knees trembled. I seek to unmake it before it consumes Skyrim. Unmake? No, comprehend. Mortals fear what they cannot archive. The rune was mortal work, not divine. Forged by Admirans who stole Kyne's breath and sought to wield it. The vision shifted, showing ancient figures chiseling glyphs into glacier stone, their breath freezing mid-air. One struck a final rune, and the ice screamed as if alive. They caged winter itself, Mora continued, but even cages erode. What you awaken now is not merely frost, it is remembrance. My ink records all, and now it records you. A tendril coiled gently around Arven's arm, tracing the veins beneath his skin. Cold knowledge seeped into his mind. Diagrams, spells, incantations written in forgotten tongues. The rune's meaning unfolded within him like frost spreading across glass. "Find the third fragment," whispered the prince. "It sleeps in Kyne's hollow heart, where her priestesses chant to the wind. There you will see the truth of gods and men." When Arven awoke, the fire was ash. Rorik stood above him, axe drawn, eyes wary. "You were gone," he said, frozen stiff, eyes wide open. "I thought you dead." Arven looked to his hands. Black ink veins ran faintly beneath the skin, pulsing with cold light. "Not dead," he murmured, voice distant. "But I've seen where knowledge sleeps." Rorik frowned. "Then tell me, what have you learned?" The scholar's eyes rose to the mountains. "That the frost we fight is not a storm. It is a memory, one that refuses to die." In the east, dawn broke pale over the peaks, and somewhere within that light a faint echo of laughter rippled, like parchment, turning itself in a forbidden book. Chapter 4. The Priestess of Kyne. The journey west carried them beyond the jagged spine of the mountains and into the wild, breathless heights of the Reach, where the wind itself seemed alive, singing hymns through hollow stone. It was said that Kyne's voice could still be heard there, carried upon tempests that predated even men. For Arven Thaler, each gust now sounded like a question. For Thane Rorik, every shadow promised battle. They rode in silence for days, guided by fragmentary notes Arven had transcribed from his dream in Apocrypha, directions written in no clear tongue, but understood nonetheless. He felt the knowledge moving in him like ink bleeding beneath the skin. Even the snow bent from his path, flurries swirling as if afraid. At last, they reached a valley untouched by road or map. In its center stood a shrine carved from living rock, its spire wrapped in bird bones and silver feathers. The air shimmered faintly with aurora light, though the sky above was grey. "The Temple of Windrise," Rorik murmured. "No one's come this far since the War of the Reachmen." Smoke rose from a small brazier before the shrine. A woman knelt there, robes of pale linen fluttering in the gale. Her hair was silver, her eyes pale blue like glacial water. She did not startle when they approached. She seemed to have known they were coming. "You carry the mark of the forbidden," she said softly, her gaze fixed upon Arven, "and the scent of ink and ice. Tell me, scholar, do you know whose whisper you carry in your blood?" Arven hesitated. "Hermaeus Mora showed me the rune's history. I seek to end it before its power spreads." The priestess rose. "You do not end what is divine. You atone for it." She turned, tracing her hand across a weathered pillar where faint runes glimmered. The Frost Rune was carved by mortals who envied Kyne's breath. They stole fragments of her voice and bound them in ice, thinking themselves her equals. When Kyne found them, she wept, and her tears froze into the first storm. She sealed their work beneath sea and stone. Yet every age, men unseal what the gods have buried. She looked upon him, and her gaze pierced deep. "How you've already begun to unmake the seal, haven't you? Mora's touch grants knowledge, not mercy. The rune now knows you as its keeper." Arven's throat tightened. The shard pulsed faintly within his satchel, a cold heartbeat against his ribs. "Then tell me how to stop it." "To stop it," she said, "you must gather its pieces, all of them. But each you claim brings you closer to what it was meant to protect." Rorik frowned. "Protect? I thought it was a weapon." The priestess turned toward the horizon, where clouds twisted into a spiral above the distant north. "It is both. The rune was forged to cage a god's breath, and if broken, that breath will be free again. Mora desires it. So too does another, a mortal who once wielded that power in secret. Arven felt the world tilt, the wind whispering like language. Who? The Archmage of Winterhold, she said. He sought Kyne's secrets years ago. He vanished into the ice and was thought dead. But I see his soul still moving, bound to the rune's call. A shadow passed across the sun, dimming the valley. The priestess lifted her staff and drew a spiral of frost in the air. It shimmered, then hardened into crystal. Within it flickered an image of Winterhold besieged by storm. Towers splitting, mages frozen mid-spell. Go, she urged. The rune awakens faster than prophecy foretold. If Winterhold falls, Skyrim's heart will follow. Rorik tightened his grip on his axe, the light of duty burning in his eyes. Then we ride for the college. As they turned to leave, the priestess called out one last time. Remember, scholar, when gods weep, their tears are not mercy, but warning. The wind howled as if echoing her words, and for the first time, Arven felt that Skyrim itself was afraid. Chapter 5. The Siege of Winterhold. The blizzard struck before dawn. From the towers of the college, it looked as though the sea of ghosts had risen to swallow the sky. A churning wall of white that devoured stars and flame alike. Arven and Thane Rorik rode through it, cloaks frozen stiff, the wind screaming like 1,000 restless souls. By the time the gates came into view, Winterhold had vanished beneath a pall of ice. The college's great bridge lay rimed in frost so thick it crackled with each step. Statues of long-dead archmages stared through veils of snow, their marble faces fractured by the storm. Yet through the wind's roar came another sound, not of nature, but of war. Shapes moved among the drifts, translucent forms clad in spectral mail, their weapons sculpted from living frost. The same wraiths that had haunted Yaldrin now marched on the college, countless and tireless, bound by the rune's pulse. By Shore, Rorik muttered, unslinging his axe. It's not a storm, it's an army. From the battlements, mages hurled fire into the maelstrom. Flames sputtered and died against the cold, the air itself devouring their heat. Arven raised his staff, chanting the words Mora had whispered into his mind. Glyphs of black ink flared around his hands, swallowing the snow mid-air. Rorik, to the main hall, he shouted. The rune's resonance is strongest there. They crossed the bridge amid chaos, lightning flashing, steel clashing, frost screaming. Each step felt like wading through glass. When they reached the Hall of the Elements, the doors were already frozen halfway shut, ice crawling across their hinges like veins. Arven struck them with a burst of magicka, shattering the barrier. Inside, the great sphere that once served as the college's focus pulsed with an eerie azure light. The shard within Arven's satchel throbbed in answer. The air quivered with the same breath that had risen from the sea. The Archmage, a stern Altmer named Selan, turned toward them, her robes torn by wind. What have you done, Thaler? She cried. The rune awakens through you. The wards are collapsing. I can stop it, Arven insisted, but I need the focusing crystal. Selan hesitated only a moment, then gestured to the dais. Then use it before the college becomes our tomb. Arven placed the shard upon the crystal's surface. At once the storm outside surged higher, drawn to the beacon like breath to flame. Lightning struck the tower, shattering windows and casting shards of ice across the hall. The rune's glow filled every corner, blue, white, and black at once, and through it a figure began to take shape. Tall, cloaked, his eyes twin embers of frost fire. The former Archmage of Winterhold, thought dead for a decade. His voice rolled through the hall like breaking glaciers. For you meddle with what you do not understand, scholar. The rune was mine to guard, and now mine to wield. The mages faltered, their spells dying mid-chant. Frost spread beneath his feet, climbing the pillars like vines. Rorik charged, axe raised high. The spectral figure moved a single hand, and the Thane was hurled backward by a gale so fierce it bent iron. Arven's blood froze in his veins. He forced his hand toward the shard, whispering the counterscript the priestess had taught him. The glyphs of Kyne clashed with Mora's sigils in a storm of opposing magic, divine breath against forbidden ink. The air screamed, the floor cracked. Outside, the blizzard split the sky in two. Half the city was buried in ice, the other half burned with lightning. The rune's light pulsed faster, as if it had found a heartbeat. The Archmage's voice boomed again, distant and inhuman. You cannot destroy winter. You can only choose who survives it. Then, the light imploded. When Arven awoke, the hall was quiet. Snow drifted through the shattered roof. Around him lay the bodies of mages and wraiths alike, frozen mid-motion. Rorik groaned nearby, alive but bleeding. The shard was gone. Only a hollow mark remained, scorched into the stone where the rune had been. It pulsed faintly once, and then silence fell. Arven looked toward the sea. On the horizon, a single column of blue light pierced the storm, rising from the northern glacier known as the Pale Mirror. The rune was calling them home. Chapter 6. Heart of the Glacier. The road to the Pale Mirror was no road at all, only a white wasteland where wind erased every trace of the world behind them. For 3 days, Arven and Rorik trudged through endless storm, guided by the faint, unwavering pillar of blue light that split the northern sky. No stars pierced that light, no warmth touched it. It was not fire, but memory, the cold remembrance of the rune's creation. Behind them, Winterhold lay buried in silence. Only 2 had survived the siege, and both bore marks of the rune's touch. Rorik's arm was veined with frost that no flame could thaw, and Arven's eyes shimmered faintly with the ink-dark hue of Mora's gift. Yet neither spoke of turning back. The rune called them, and the call was irresistible. At last, they stood before the glacier, an expanse of glass-like ice stretching beyond sight. Beneath its surface, shapes moved slowly, as though the past itself was imprisoned there. Dragons, warriors, and towers swallowed by time. At the glacier's heart burned the same symbol Arven had seen beneath the sea of ghosts, now vast enough to drown mountains in its glow. The Pale Mirror, Rorik murmured. I've heard sailors say it reflects the soul of anyone who dares to look too long. Arven stepped forward. Then may it show us the truth. The ice pulsed once, then cracked like thunder. From its depths a figure emerged, walking as if through water. The Archmage of Winterhold, his form wreathed in frostfire, his flesh more spirit than man. The shard he had stolen from the college hovered before his chest, merging with 2 others. The fragments from Hjaldrin and the Sea of Ghosts. When he spoke, the wind died. You followed well, little seeker. Do you now understand what the rune is? Arven's voice trembled. It was forged to cage Kyne's breath, to bind the storm. The Archmage smiled, and frost fell from his lips. A cage, yes, but every prison hungers for a warden. When the gods sealed her breath, they left behind power enough to shape worlds. I will be the voice that commands it. Skyrim will kneel, not burn. Rorik stepped beside Arven, axe gleaming with frostlight. You would freeze the world to rule its ruins. I would preserve it, the Archmage hissed. No more decay, no more time, only stillness, eternal and pure. The ice beneath them trembled, cracking into a vast circle of mirrored shards. Around its edge rose the runes themselves, towering like pillars of frozen flame. At their center hung the combined rune, a sphere of radiant frost pulsing like a heartbeat. Arven raised his staff, Mora's glyphs swirling around him. You are not the rune's master, you are its echo. He struck the ice, and the world shattered. The storm erupted into a spiral of blue and white, swallowing sky and earth. The Archmage's laughter became a roar as he raised his hands, summoning blades of solid frost. Rorik met him head-on, the clash of axe and ice ringing like thunder through the storm. Arven chanted words that were not his own, the language of Kyne herself, learned from the priestess's visions. The wind screamed in answer. The glacier split open, revealing a chasm of light beneath, as if the land's soul had been torn bare. The Archmage staggered, his body fracturing like glass. You would invoke her, he bellowed. You think the gods forgive theft? Arven's voice rose above the gale. The gods forgive nothing, but they remember balance. He drove his staff into the heart of the ice. Light exploded outward, not cold, but pure. The rune's glow wavered, fighting to hold its form. The Archmage reached toward it, desperate, his voice cracking like frozen stone. "It's not over, Thaler. The rune cannot die. It only waits for new hands." The glacier convulsed, swallowing him whole. The blue pillar shattered into a million shards of frost that drifted upward, dissolving into the aurora. When silence returned, Arven knelt beside Rorik. The Thane's armor was cracked with ice, his breath shallow. "You did it," he rasped. Arven looked toward the horizon, where dawn began to break faintly over the sea of ghosts. "No," he said quietly. "We only broke its shell." Beneath the glacier, the faintest pulse of blue light flickered once more, like the last breath of something vast, waiting to wake again. Chapter 7. The Shattering of the Rune. The aurora swirled violently over the pale mirror, painting the ice in ribbons of violet and teal. A hush fell upon the frozen expanse, broken only by the distant roar of cracking glaciers. Arven and Thane Rorik stood at the edge of the chasm, staring into the abyss where the heart of the Frost Rune had once pulsed. The air carried a taste of metal and ozone, a scent that burned the lungs with the memory of frost. The rune's fragments had scattered during the battle, yet their power lingered, whispering through the glacier like a wounded beast. Shadows moved along the ice, shapes that twisted between mortal and spirit, bound by the rune's lingering will. Each wraith carried the echo of its master, the Archmage, and they glided toward the center, converging where the glacier split into a gaping maw. "We have to finish this," Arven said, gripping his staff. Mora's ink still ran faintly beneath his skin, a cold pulse that matched the heartbeat of the rune. "If we don't, it will only gather strength again. It will rise one day to freeze all of Skyrim." Rorik tightened his gauntlet around his axe. "Then we make sure it doesn't get the chance." From the depths, a single shard floated upward, suspended mid-air by invisible hands. The fragment radiated an icy light so intense that it cast their shadows as long, flickering specters against the walls of ice. It was as if the rune itself had taken a final breath, weighing their courage and resolve. A voice, not entirely human, not entirely Daedric, echoed across the glacier. "Do you believe mortals may undo what gods and kings once forged?" The rune's power surged, sweeping a gust of frozen wind that knocked them to their knees. Arven's teeth chattered, his vision blurred, yet he felt the priestess of Kyne's guidance within him, steady as the wind itself. The path forward was clear. One of them must merge their life force with the rune to shatter its bond completely. Rorik's hand fell upon Arven's shoulder. "This is your path, mage. I've fought enough battles to know when a man must choose. Finish this." Arven hesitated for a fraction of a heartbeat, gazing into the shard. In its frozen depths, he saw visions of Skyrim, the pale fields of Whiterun, the forests of Falkreath, the spires of Windhelm, all encased in eternal frost. Beyond that, he glimpsed Kyne herself, her face veiled by storm clouds, tears of wind and snow streaming from her eyes. She did not command him, she only watched. Drawing a deep breath, Arven raised his staff and placed both hands upon the shard. Cold seared his skin, but the knowledge he had gained from Mora and the priestess guided his will. He whispered the words of unmaking, Kyne's ancient tongue blending with the mortal runes. The glacier shuddered violently. The shards of the rune flared, resisting, then began to fracture. The Archmage's voice echoed faintly, a ghostly taunt. "Fooled, do you think frost dies with the body?" Rorik cut through the first wave of frost wraiths, swinging his axe with the fury of man against immortal frost. Snow and ice splintered, each strike leaving a wake of steaming frostbite. Above, the aurora twisted violently, streaking the sky with unnatural colors as the rune's power clawed against the spell. Arven's vision blurred as the shard pulsed against his chest, and he felt his life slip into the ice. He poured all of himself into the rune, memories, breath, blood, and it screamed. The world seemed to tilt, glaciers cracking, winds tearing across the land like a chorus of grief and triumph. Then in an instant it shattered. A silence unlike any other fell. The shards melted into mist, drifting into the sky like snowflakes carried on a wind that knew no end. The frost wraiths dissolved, their cries fading into echoes of eternity. Rorik fell to his knees beside Arven, grasping his shoulder as the mage's pulse slowed, faint but alive. The glacier lay broken, yet serene. The pale light of dawn spread across the mountains, reflecting off the fractured ice, revealing the first true colors Skyrim had seen in days. The land breathed again, free of the rune's grip. Arven rose slowly, exhausted but whole. Rorik clapped him on the back, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We've done it," he said, voice rough but certain. "The frost will not claim Skyrim, not today, not ever." And in the wind, the faintest whisper carried across the peaks, almost gentle, almost like laughter. Balance restored until the next dream of frost awakens. The heroes turned back toward the world they had saved, knowing that some memories, and some powers, never truly die.